On March 5th, 2007, a car bomb was exploded on Mutanabbi Street in Baghdad. Mutanabbi Street is a mixed Shia-Sunni area. More than 30 people were killed and more than 100 were wounded. This locale is the historic center of Baghdad bookselling, a winding street filled with bookstores and outdoor bookstalls, named after the famous 10th century classical Arab poet al-Mutanabbi. This is an old and established street for bookselling and has been for hundreds of years. Mutanabbi Street also holds cafes, stationery shops, and even tea and tobacco shops. It has been the heart and soul of the Baghdad literary and intellectual community. This tragedy is part of a wider and continuing tragedy, but one that we want to isolate and address, not only for the loss of lives, but also for the implications underlying the destruction of a street where books were sold. Bookselling on Mutanabbi Street is no different from bookselling here. We traffic in memory, ideas, and dreams. In that sense, we feel that Mutanabbi Street starts at the front door of all of our bookshops. Mutanabbi Street starts here. Our first reader will be Sinan Antoon.
When I was torn by war, I took a brush immersed in death and drew a window on war's wall. I opened it, searching for something, but all I saw was another war and a mother weaving a shroud for the dead man still in her womb. And one last one entitled A Photograph. The photograph was of an Iraqi boy on the front page of the New York Times. He sat at the edge of the truck, 8 or 9 years old, surrounded by his family, his father, mother, and 5 siblings were asleep. His head was buried in his hands. All the clouds of the world were waiting on the threshold of his eyes. The tall man wiped off the sweat and started digging the 7th grave. The next reader is going to be Diane DePrima. Thank you.
I'm going to read a few things that I wrote sitting in a hotel room in whatever year that was, '01, I guess, when we started bombing Afghanistan. These are short poems on the Afghan war. 1, small bones of mountain children in the snow. 2, bags of rice burst open, burlap flaps in the wind. Even the label USA is fading. 3, we airdrop transistor radios. Can you eat them? Will they keep you warm? This one called Les Américains, written October 5th, 2001. We are feral, rare as mountain wolves. Our hearts are pure and stupid. We go down, pitted against our own. Then one other short thing. We gathered there frequently. Old scholars, printers, book collectors, old and young writers passed through the place on any given afternoon. All kinds of activity came through the shop in the years I worked there. They were the early years of the Black uprising, Black awareness. Robert Williams was active in South Carolina. There was a period of time when the cot in the back of the store was a drop-off for various disassembled armaments. Sometimes someone we didn't know would come in and put something, a bunch of miscellaneous hardware, under the mattress, making the cot unusable for several days. In the day or two, someone else would come by and take the hardware away in a shopping bag. and that would be that for a week or so. There was one wonderful black photographer who would often come in with an empty shopping bag. From what I understood, he would leave the store in a zigzag path and eventually get on a train going south. Thank you.
I wanted to read a poem that was sent by the poet that I invited to the recent San Francisco International Poetry Festival from Iraq. I've been in touch with Saba Jassim for more than a year and a half. After the United States would not give him his visa, I asked him to, I told him about Mutanabbi Street, and he wrote a poem, and he wrote it in English, though he writes of course, in Arabic. But this one he wrote in English, so I'll read it. One figure in the poem you should know, Humbaba, which is a figure, an ogre, a monster of immemorial age. That was a special big garden, a forest where all types of trees and flowers grew, the trees bending down gently, flinging branches. Our orchard grew like a crown on the sun's eyebrow. Where did Humbaba come from? His mother was just a cave, his father unknown. Who made him a friend, pretending guardian of the orchard? Did those nice shrubs need fear to go begging for a guardian and have Humbaba and his treacherous ilk? Those plants and flowers were like books everyone could read, not cut and throw away. Their different fantastic colors had formed our blood so that our veins ran smoothly. Our 7 wonders showed. Then Humbaba made a whirlwind of fire and snow. Who crowned him king? Who showed him our garden was but a jail? Humbaba was great and scary, but not so very strong, though no one could ever conquer him, as no one would ever try. Time and again, when things grew old, Humbaba alone believed himself eternal and young, still powerful, able to defeat all. Humbaba didn't want to know one fact, that accumulation will lead to eruptive change. But sadly, when suddenly he realized it after all, he chose to check its power on all, the hard, the tall. The ogre cut all the willows and left them wailing behind. He crushed all the shrubs and plants, leaving them creeping and broken all over. He damaged the flowers and colors. The flowers withered, their leaves all burned, and soon they were throwing their seeds every which way. And when the whole orchard changed into a dry, gray waste, Humbaba, his mind like stone, shouted his horrible cry of fire and burned all that gray and yellow. Birds of all kinds were flying away with ashes in their beaks, which Humbaba couldn't oversee anymore or ever set on fire. Then grandfather ended his day and continued closing his big, thick yellow book, turning to his grandsons and daughters and handing them a big red bud, then bidding them good night and laying his head on his yawning book, he glances solemnly at the full moon in the core of the sky, his eyelids blinking once, searching for that big silvery rose. The next reader is Dima Shahabi.
I'd like to move on with Nazik al-Malaika, Iraqi poet, one of the most prominent and brilliant poets of her time, recently passed away this summer in Cairo in June actually. She was not only a poet, she was a luminous and free-thinking pioneer in establishing the theories of what has come to be known as free verse in Arabic poetry. In addition to her extensive laments on the oppression of women, inner turmoil, and melancholy, her poetry was also the poetry of political defiance, resistance, and national struggle. She left. No cheek turned pale, no lip trembled. The doors did not hear the story of her death. No window curtain overflowed with sorrow and gloom to follow the tomb until it disappeared. The news tumbled down the avenue, its echo not finding a shelter, so it strayed forgotten in some hole, the moon lamenting its depression. The night surrendered itself without worry to the morning. The light brought the voice of the milk girl, the fasting, and the moaning of a starved cat, of which nothing remained except bones. The fussing of salesmen, the struggle of life, kids threw stones at one another in the middle of the road, while dirty water flooded the avenue, and the wind toyed with gates at the rooftops, alone, in a state of semi-oblivion.
On the day Mutanabbi Street was bombed, did you notice how quickly the open sky folded in upon itself? Did you see the flakes of burnt pages floating like torn moth wings towards the fetid smoke, then drifting down to rest? Or the broken teacups and coffee-stained saucers, the splintered chairs and empty shoe, the bits of gray matter, the splattered blood? And just before the street was eviscerated by a searing phalanx of death and despair, delusion and destruction that destroyed more than those 30 lives, twisted far more than the 100 souls who were bent and crippled amidst its rage, just before that moment, did you hear the patter, the proclamation, the prayer as they wrangled and summoned and swore, laughed and cajoled, denied and affirmed? Did you hear the words as they fell? For 1,000 years we have, 2,000 years, more coffee. What do you think? But this book says map, border, industry, collusion, resistance, truth, spirit, faith, doctrine, domain, love, free, portal, open, wind, cut. Did you hear the euphony of the street, like a rainforest of songbirds perched amidst the crinkle and fluttering leaves of their books and newspapers, as they addressed, if not solved, defined, if not created, the problems and the promise of tomorrow? Did you hear the explosion, the screech, the howls, the scream? Did you even know of the dreams imploded inside the molten iron, splayed blood, and torn guts and flying across the narrow, book-lined street, as debate turned to barbed screeches, philosophy into choked smoke, and 1,000 years of history was buried in the rubble? Or was there nothing except an inexorable, deadly silence? And the next reader is Rick London.
So I'm going to read a few poems, translations by the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. I have the wisdom of one condemned to die. I possess nothing, so nothing can possess me, and have written my will in my own blood. O inhabitants of my song, trust in water. And I sleep pierced and crowned by my tomorrow. I dream the earth's heart is greater than its map, more clear than its mirrors and my gallows. I was lost in a white cloud that carried me up high, as if I were a hoopoe, and the wind itself my wings. At dawn, the call of the night guard woke me from my dream, from my language. You will live another death, so revise your last will. The hour of execution is postponed again. I asked, Until when? He said, wait till you have died some more. I said, I possess nothing, so nothing can possess me, and have written my will in my own blood. O inhabitants of my song, trust in water. And this last poem has an epigraph from Bassam Hajar. The cypress is the shadow of the tree, not the tree itself, and has no shadow, because it is the tree's shadow. The cypress is in pieces, like a shattered minaret. It's asleep in the road, in its own ascetic shadows, green and dark, just like it is. No one has been harmed. Cars pass by, speeding over its branches, rising dust settling on their windows. The cypress is in pieces, but the dove that chose it doesn't move its exposed nest to a nearby accommodation. Overhead, 2 migrating birds circle the sufficiency of its nesting place and trade gestures. A woman says to her neighbor, I wonder, did you see a storm come by? No, nor a bulldozer. And yet the cypress is in pieces. And someone passing the debris says, maybe it got bored from neglect or worn out by time, for it's as long as a giraffe and as meaningless as a dust broom, and it provides no shade for lovers. A small boy says, I used to draw it without error. Its lines were easy to follow. And a girl says, the sky today is lacking because the cypress is in pieces. And a young man says, no, the sky today is complete because the cypress is in pieces. And I say to myself, it's not obscure or clear. The cypress is in pieces. There's only this. The cypress is in pieces.
This poem I wrote shortly after 9/11. The terrorists for Rachel Corrie and all those who were idealists and who actually believed that they could make an effect of social change. The terrorist who lives amongst us is not you. The terrorist who lurks in the shadows of our crowded city streets isn't me. He's not a demon with bulging eyes, a twisted mouth full of dirt, a crooked teeth, fangs dripping with blood. The terrorist amongst us doesn't have a belly that sags from the weight of innocent flesh consumed. He's not the savage gunner who waits for our children to turn the corner on their way to school, or the mad monster itching to detonate a human bomb. No, this heinous, hateful replica of Satan doesn't look like an Arab or a Jew, an Asian or a Caucasian, an Indian or an African. So don't trouble yourself to look for the one who most resembles the photograph or sketch of our televised enemy. Don't make a habit of supplying the motives of sin hidden underneath dark skin, because the enemy is skin deep. The enemy is the corner grocer with a family of 4, a pipe fitter with a slain mother and a child, or a student with dreams of statehood, or a teenage girl driven by desperation and fear, or a dentist or an apprentice at the local print shop, or the son of a dead soldier who hides behind the eaves of deserted ambitions, who crouches in the wounds of the dead and the dying, who hurls stones at tanks and encroaching soldiers, who stands unmoved before a rolling tank, who stares behind shattered windows with ancient eyes riveted with barbed tears. The enemy is never the one who kills for no reason. The enemy is never the one who must be vanquished at all costs. No, it is not so easy to destroy a cancer growing from inside, a shapeless, shifting corridor of blame. Not so easy to burn a legacy of intricate betrayals and broken treaties. Not so easy to spit in the face of history and to declare the enemy a cold killer devoid of shame, a devil who threatens our God-given right to freedom and peace. The enemy is not you. The enemy is not me. The enemy lives within us, not outside us. He is Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, atheist, Hindu, Jew. He is our collective face, our human creation, the evolution, the devolution, the ripening of long injustices. And thank you. The next poet is Michael Palmer.
What of that wolfhound at full stride? What of the woman in technical dress and the amber eye that serves as feral guide and witness to the snowy hive? What of the singer robed in red and frozen at mid-song? And the stone, its brokenness, or the voice oft-seen that says, note the dragonfly by the iris, but ask no questions of flight, no questions of iridescence. All of this and the faint promise of a sleeve, the shuttle's course, the weave. What of these? What of that century? Did you see it pass? What of that wolfhound at your back? And then a poem that is for Mahmoud Darwish, called The Dream of Narcissus. The dream of Narcissus, that there would be a silence loud as time. The dream of the writer, that there could be a silence loud as time. The dream of time, that rest might come. The dream of rest, that unrest might arise. The dream of the palm, that pilgrims would enter the village. The dream of the village, that they depart with their fronds. And the house dreaming of its leveling and the exile of his well. The dream of night, that the day would be purified. The dream of day, that the dark would be lifted. And the dream of the dream, but who's to speak of this? I don't think this needs to be explained. It's called Madman with Broom. The realist crows return at earliest morning, and the madman with broom, madman in his nightshirt with a broom, he too returns. He thinks to roust the crows from the mulberry boughs by jabbing and swirling his broom, by crazily twirling his broom in the wet summer air, and hurling curses skyward beyond the boughs and the crows towards the fading gods among the fading stars. But the realist crows know it is only a man in a nightshirt after dawn, that the broom is a broom, and that his cries are nothing more than words and half-words the heavy air will swallow. They rise anyway from the tree, as best to quiet him and let morning be morning. Soon enough they'll return again by twos and threes, settling among the spreading limbs, their laughter the same before and after. Catherine Case is the next reader.
This one is called The Mountain by Hashim Shafiq, and it's translated by Sadi Simawe. I have washed the mountain, I have washed the stones and the snow, and I have washed the sand. I have washed the pebbles and the wind that clings to the trees. I have washed the mountain. I have lit the paths and the backways around the mountain. I have lit the caves and the stairs and the hideouts in the folds of the mountain. I have washed the summit and every crevice of the mountain so that my loved ones might pass in the forenoon of the mountain day. This is called A Lament for a Marketplace in Babylon. It's by Abdul Karim Al-Qasid, and it's a reference to a suicide bombing in Hila in the Babel province. This one and the next poem are both translated by Salam Yusuf. On this horizon, reaching all the way to God, are gravestones and angels weeping. What are people waiting for? Their ship? Here it comes, borne by the deluge. In a marketplace now frequented by money changers with beards and baggy trousers, I wonder, who gathers the scattered limbs, restores the hand to the child's body, and that breast to the mother? And who throws open the gates for hollow-eyed gods coming in from Babylon with red chests and white furious hair? I wonder, who? On the day of March 1st, in the 5th year after the 2nd millennium, a massacre took place in Babylon. It's a nice poem. It's a great poem. It's my pleasure to introduce the next poet, George Evans.
First, I would like to read a poem by my dear friend and wife, Daisy Zamora, who was to read here today, but is in Nicaragua. And keeping in mind what Michael said about Jorge in Casablanca, D.C., I'll read it in her language, or in my Spanish first, and then in translation. It's a poem directly addressed to poets, but certainly to activists as well. Tierra de nadie. Somos territorio minada en claridad. Quien traspasa el alambrado resucita. Pero a quien le interesa trepar en la espesura. ¿Quién se atreve a cruzar la tempestad? Alguien quiere mirar de frente a la pureza. Por eso nos han cercado en esta tierra de nadie, bajo fuego cruzado y permanente. No man's land. We are a minefield of clarity, and whoever crosses the barbed wire comes back to life. But who's interested in crawling through undergrowth? Who dares sail a tempest? Who wants to come face to face with purity? That's why we're fenced off in this no man's land, under permanent crossfire. Three bomb poems. Flag study. Red. She walks into the bright vegetable garden, chopped, watered to life from brittle landscape, leans her hoe against goat wire, admires shoots balanced on turned earth, looks up, fulfilled, as leaf-sized clouds, hands on her hips, her jaw falls open, and a bomb drops down her throat. White. The horizon, a black line against brilliant white landscape, pale blue sky above it, empty except for heat devil blur. A raindrop sound hits a wooden post against cloudless light. Another, the lamb, his children, wife, then he, drenched in bullet rain. Blue. The final moment of night, passing, exposes limbs, torsos, heads, breasts, humans, cows, goats, curved and knotted heaps, glazed blue against bitten grass. Final piece, the title is a headline from a newspaper. I can't remember which paper. Anti-war activist self-immolates in Iraq war protests during morning rush hour along Chicago's Kennedy Expressway near Giant Flame of the Millennium sculpture 4 days before November 2006 elections, and no one pays attention. Everything but the heart reduced to ash. Thank you.
I just want to thank George for bringing to bear on us some of the numbers, some of the horrific things that are happening in Iraq right now. This poem was drawn from my experience as an Iraqi, from the culture, from the music, and from its traditions. So I've dedicated this poem to Iraq. I think it will be helpful for you to know El-Gubanchi is somebody I mentioned here along with Al-Mutanabbi, who is the poet that you're familiar with now. El-Gubanchi was famous for the classical maqam music, which is recognized as a world music, a great history and tradition of music, and he has taught all the great modern singers of the 20th century which came out of Iraq. So his music has touched me, and you'll hear it in this poem, 33 Beads on a String. I woke from the nightmare of a gutted maqam, not because I have not yet bled my life in yellow, but because minarets sky downwards, looking for purple births. One burly buffalo shrouded in hooves and hot breath, because the skin is not yet numb and the lights are not flickering. I will continue to sip at my hot tea and stare at the dust-colored noon. One white Dizdasha screams with the brilliance of red. Can you hear them, the melodious intent, the glimmering oud in their eyes? Faith stitch by seam, a garment I have sewn to my skin. Whatever remains of El-Gubanchi's 1932 Cairo studio recording lives between the old cobblestone quarter and my still warm mahogany ear. I should have gotten up to shake his hand, this uncomfortable tension between me and God. Medina, its streets adorned with smells from the bazaar, yet I have chosen to adorn myself in the still concrete of columns. I'm for the transcription of the Arabic, sweets spread over toast, a dark syrup from dates. Last night, El-Gubanchi dreamt of his father's fallen tooth. In the morning, he howled a song in the name of his father. Iraq's new fathers weep at the birth of their sons. Do not cry for Layla or for Hind, but drink the red wine and grow your love doubly, one for the ruby in the cup, the other for its rouge upon your cheek. Bombs rake the eyes of the sleeping Assyrian gods, as if it were only a sandbox, a few worthless grains of sand. I'll cut for you the last swath of blue from the sky, sever my hand if you'll let me, but for 5 minutes more, leave me to sleep without the knowledge of war. A qanun weeps near the funeral of music. Having been occupied, notes mourn for the loss of their song. I'm for a concert of horses. The origin of gazelles leapt up from the heart of El-Gubanchi. Had you made small steps into the desert inside us, or listened for the guttural lodge deep within our throats, you would have come bearing gifts. I have nothing in red that I would not abide in green. Mutanabbi wrote the heart of our silken tarab. What need have we for you? No poem is ever enough read, but that its blood might river through the veins of its people. Beneath the desert sun, a cage in Abu Ghraib, one man by one man by one man breathed 6. Thousands of tons rung sonorous from the sky. Where is God? Black-eyed woman, the street dogs are running wild. Will you save me? Simple white ignorance. Even the desert has gone into hiding. There is no more meaning here than the crested moon holds towards a dying grove of date trees. I'm for the Arabic, for the transcription of the Arabic, Zatar Zayt over fire-baked bread. The twin rivers have already carved for us a history. Our poets have already explained to us the desert. By what right have you come? Who of you has seen the rustic crane in the tree? No chimes, but for its delicate wide beak, ushers an intemperate reprieve. 33 beads on a string. Why pretend to know beyond the presence of click? Thank you. Please welcome Gail Scher.
The first one is, why did she care? Why did she care? She wondered, laying aside the book. A dim light could be seen, possibly from a cabin, reaching in, not for the word, but for the space, which had a time. Fat drops driven violently sideways. The man's mind, into which she tossed herself, becomes a bird. Fly away, bird. Fly south where you are needed. Letters moved. She could barely make them out. The sky moved, hanging bluntly. A circle swayed, toppled to the sea. To you, sea, I chant, and to the one with ears, hearing you into me. This one is called Having Eaten Fish. Having eaten fish, I open myself to make them more comfortable. I pet the fawn, twisting my calves. 2 fish leap, kiss, and die. Fish, fry here, oh my fish, sway grass in coin of rain. So far we kill, the all of fishes presides, while I walk by, covering my head. The last one is, my bones are in the mountain. My bones are in that mountain, in the veil of flowers beyond its southern pass, slipped down to me by the sky long ago, who wander broken, a coterie of lambs thought of as a bush. The land was yellow and contained a tree. A man tied to a pole looked up. He is praying, and others too are glancing eastward. O house of cans, I squat, wind blows. To replace its word is why I gather mushrooms. In sticky sun, I squat. Peaceful juice spills on my gaping pant leg, finally, finally. The mountain becomes a cloud, slouching south, following the man. And it's my great pleasure to present Bo.
This is called Lesson. Trying to pull yourself back along the words, trying to get close to what holds the flesh to them. So you talk over the words, you shout to the words, and the words sometimes just begin to drag you along like a bad leg, to carry you to a place where they can turn and knife-like skin you into other words and move you closer, try to kill you, keep you there, or let you hear, however briefly, their deadly harmony. This is called Markings, and it's in 2 parts. 1, the land is leveled. The eyewitnesses are moved to a yard, a street. The road is made smooth. 2, we have the ability to not regret. Not one death, and then exactly 2, even before another. And in this approximate silence, we have felt that not regretting has spared us loneliness. It's called At the Door. You did not tell me about these hours, how thick they were and wounded. I hear myself telling someone to punch me just to figure the order of my beliefs. Someone else in my clothes who would view this and move on. Explain again the conditions that will bring along the morning and what it is here that convenes the night. And then the last poem, this is called Upon Living. They shove your feet out of the smokestack kitchen. They narrow the big sea into a line of your sweat. And then they take away your last word. And then they take away another. Now you put the keys back in your pocket, and now you push on the door until it is in flame. Until it is in flame. Next reader is Jane Hirschfield.
One sand grain among the others in winter wind. I wake with my hand held over the place of grief in my body. Depend on nothing, the voice advises, but even that is useless. My ears are useless, my familiar and intimate tongue. My protecting hand is useless, that wants to hold the single leaf to the tree and say, not this one will be saved. A poem written on September 15th, 2001, against the knowledge that exactly what would happen was probably going to happen. The dead do not want us dead. The dead do not want us dead. Such petty errors are left for the living. Nor do they want our mourning, no gift to them, not rage, not weeping. Return one of them, any one of them, to the earth, and look. Such foolish skipping, such telling of bad jokes, such feasting. Even a cucumber, even a single anise seed, feasting. And the last poem. Foolish of me, and yet, optimism. The title is only optimism. The other part was a preface. More and more I have come to admire resilience. Not the simple resistance of a pillow whose foam returns over and over to the same shape, but the sinuous tenacity of a tree. Finding the light newly blocked on one side, it turns in another. A blind intelligence, true, but out of such persistence arose turtles, rivers, mitochondria, figs. All this resinous, unretractable earth. The next reader is Summer Brenner.
I'm going to read today an excerpt from Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth. I wanted to say a few words about Inanna. This is the oldest literary work that we have. These are the cuneiform tablets that were excavated in the late 1880s and early 1890s by the University of Pennsylvania. Tens of thousands of fragments of cuneiform tablets. The story of Inanna starts in her adolescence. It travels through her journey as a queen and a goddess, and much of her story is devoted to the love, a very passionate love for Dumuzi, who is a shepherd, whom she takes as her husband, lover, and king. And this is called The Return. A lament was raised in the city. My lady weeps bitterly for her young husband. Inanna weeps bitterly for her young husband. Woe for her husband, woe for her young love, woe for her house, woe for her city. Dumuzi was taken captive in Uruk. He will no longer bathe in Eridu. He will no longer soap himself at the holy shrine. He will no longer treat the mother of Inanna as his mother. He will no longer perform his sweet task among the maidens of the city. He will no longer compete with the young men of the city. He will no longer raise his sword higher than the Kugara priests. Great is the grief of those who mourn for Dumuzi. Inanna wept for Dumuzi. Gone is my husband, my sweet husband. Gone is my love, my sweet love. My beloved has been taken from the city. Oh, you flies of the steppe, my beloved bridegroom has been taken from me before I could wrap him with a proper shroud. The wild bull lives no more. The shepherd, the wild bull, lives no more. Dumuzi, the wild bull, lives no more. I ask the hills and valleys, where is my husband? I say to them, I can no longer bring him food. I can no longer serve him drink. The jackal lies down in his bed. The raven dwells in his sheepfold. You ask me about his reed pipe. The wind must play it for him. You ask me about his sweet songs. The wind must sing them for him. Surtur, the mother of Dumuzi, wept for her son. My heart plays the reed pipe of mourning. Once my boy wandered so freely on the steppe, now he is captive. Once Dumuzi wandered so freely on the steppe, now he is bound. The ewe gives up her lamb. The goat gives up her kid. My heart plays the reed pipe of mourning. O treacherous step, in the place where he once said, my mother will ask for me. Now he cannot move his hands. He cannot move his feet. My heart plays the reed pipe of mourning. I would go to him. I would see my child. The mother walked to the desolate place. Surtur walked to where Dumuzi lay. She looked at the slain wild bull. She looked into his face. She said, my child, the face is yours. The spirit has fled. There is mourning in the house. There is grief in the inner chambers. The sister wandered about the city, weeping for her brother. Geshtanana wandered about the city, weeping for Dumuzi. O my brother, who is your sister? I am your sister. O Dumuzi, who is your mother? I am your mother. The day that dawns for you will also dawn for me. The day that you will see, I will also see. I would find my brother. I would comfort him. I would share his fate. When she saw the sister's grief, when Anana saw the grief of Geshtanana, she spoke to her gently. Your brother's house is no more. Dumuzi has been carried away by the Gala. I would take you to him, but I do not know the place. Then a fly appeared. The holy fly circled the air above Anana's head and spoke, if I tell you where Dumuzi is, what will you give me? Anana said, if you tell me, I will let you frequent the beer houses and taverns. I will let you dwell among the talk of the wise ones. I will let you dwell among the songs of the minstrels. The fly spoke. Lift your eyes to the edges of the steppe. Lift your eyes to Arali. There you will find Geshtanana's brother. There you will find the shepherd Dumuzi. Anana and Geshtanana went to the edges of the steppe. They found Dumuzi weeping. Anana took Dumuzi by the hand and said, you will go to the underworld half the year. Your sister, since she has asked, will go the other half. On the day you are called, that day you will be taken. On the day Geshtanana is called, that day you will be set free. Anana placed Dumuzi in the hands of the eternal. Holy Arish Gagal, great is your renown. Holy Arish Gagal, I sing your praises. Thank you.